By the summer of 1940, the French state has collapsed. The nation is fractured, with a northern zone under German occupation and a southern regime in Vichy collaborating with the invaders. In London, Brigadier General Charles de Gaulle is attempting to build a government in exile. He has a voice on the BBC, but he possesses no sovereign soil and no standing army to give his Free France movement any physical weight. To gain legitimacy on the world stage, de Gaulle looks toward the African colonies. He believes that by flipping the French Empire to his side, he can secure the resources and territory needed to re-enter the war. The strategic pivot point is Dakar, Senegal. Its deep-water port is the most significant naval asset in French West Africa, positioned perfectly to control Atlantic shipping lanes. There are also immense financial stakes hidden in the city. Before the fall of Paris, the Bank of France secretly shipped a massive portion of its gold reserves to Dakar, keeping the bullion out of German reach. But any attempt to take the harbor must account for the Richelieu. It is France's most modern battleship, a floating fortress armed with 380mm guns that can outrange almost anything in the British or Free French fleet. De Gaulle and Winston Churchill assume that the mere appearance of Allied fleet will trigger a wave of local patriotism. They anticipate a bloodless handover, believing the colonial administration will voluntarily surrender its territory, its gold, and its warships. On September 23, 1940, Operation Menace arrives. A joint British and Free French armada appears on the horizon, dropping anchor just outside the range of Dakar's coastal guns. De Gaulle begins with psychological warfare. He uses radio broadcasts to issue confident ultimatums, calling on the Vichy authorities in Dakar to step down and join his movement. The response from the shore is immediate and defiant. Pierre Boisson, the Vichy governor-general, refuses to yield his post or acknowledge de Gaulle's authority. Boisson's refusal highlights the deep fracture within the French military. To the defenders in Dakar, de Gaulle is a rebel, while their ultimate loyalty remains with the official government led by Marshal Pétain. The failure of diplomacy is followed by the roar of artillery. Vichy shore batteries open fire on the Allied ships, signaling that the port will be held by force. The Allied fleet is now engaged in a direct battle against the very troops they intended to rally, turning a mission of liberation into a civil war on the African coast. A chaotic naval bombardment erupts. The British Royal Navy trades salvos with the Vichy defenders, and the harbor is immediately filled with the splashes of heavy-caliber shells. The Richelieu is the centerpiece at the defense. Despite being incomplete, the battleship's massive guns act as a lethal deterrent, holding the entire Allied armada at bay. The ship's effectiveness is partly due to an engineering innovation. Its main guns are housed in quadruple turrets, but each turret is split down the middle by a heavy armored bulkhead. This redundancy ensures that a catastrophic hit on one side of the turret cannot disable the entire unit. If two guns are destroyed, the internal bulkhead protects the remaining two, allowing the ship to maintain half its firepower and continue the fight. As the casualties mount, de Gaulle faces a political disaster. Taking Dakar would require him to massacre his own countrymen and destroy the very naval fleet he hopes to lead. Rather than preside over a French bloodbath, de Gaulle orders a full retreat, bringing the operation to an abrupt and painful end. Operation Menace ends in strategic failure. Dakar remains firmly under Vichy control, dealing a massive blow to the prestige of the Free French movement. In Europe, the Vichy regime seizes on the retreat, presenting the failure of the raid as a monumental victory for their administration. The Vichy propaganda machine floods the occupied homeland with messages portraying the British as treacherous allies who fire on French sailors. They use images of the destruction to frame the Royal Navy as the primary enemy of the French Empire. This narrative makes de Gaulle's recruitment efforts nearly impossible. To a public being told that London is actively attacking French colonies, joining the resistance begins to look like an act of betrayal. By framing the battle as a successful defense against a British aggression, Vichy effectively discouraged civilians from supporting the resistance, deepening the psychological divide within the French public. While generals in London and ministers in Vichy fought over the geopolitical meaning of the battle, the local population in Senegal dealt with its immediate, violent reality. For the Senegalese civilians in Dakar, the naval bombardment was a terrifying disruption. Thousands were forced to abandon their homes and flee the city to escape the exchange of heavy artillery. This trauma became a permanent fixture in the local cultural memory. In Wolof oral history, the event is used as a chronological marker, known simply as 1940, the year of the bullets of Dakar. It remains a stark reminder of the colonial experience. Populations like the tirailleurs Senegalais were conscripted and forced to fight and die in a European civil war that had arrived on their own shores. The physical landscape of modern Dakar still carries these traces. Monuments to the shared history of French and African soldiers stand as reminders of a colonial military infrastructure that shaped the city's development. The violence of 1940 persists as a foundational moment in Senegalese history, a localized trauma that continues to shape the city's memory and its physical monuments today.